Ever since their invention around 150 years ago, open-air pools have achieved unprecedented popularity in helping the residents of Vienna learn to swim. To this day, swimming helps to make summer celebrations special, whether it be at the beach, swimming pool, riverbank, or brick pond. We simply cycled there, got changed and jumped in. Get out of your clothes was the new motto as the old morals started to change. Changing from the cinched waist, free from long skirts and top hats, people turned to an entirely new body image at the turn of the century.
You'd think they would have been embarrassed. The only one who was embarrassed was me.
Training instead of fainting for the women, the joys of muscle flexing and bathing for the men, and encounters in the water with the opposite sex for both. Wet clothes, long grass, and broken rules.
Back then, it was still allowed. Maybe it was forbidden, but we ignored it.
Summer sun and water on the skin, and the endless desire for life. Differences in class were shrinking, the connection with nature growing stronger, and the need for relaxation found its fulfillment in country trips and summer vacations. City dwellers made new discoveries when swimming in the fresh water, refreshing their senses and rediscovering their bodies, but of course, not just their own. Originally, bathing was strictly gender-separated, which meant there was no possibility of bathing or swimming together. There were women's baths and men's baths in separate areas. The alluring idea of what might be hidden under women's skirts and bodices has always inspired the thoughts of the men's world. Finally, summer baths allowed detailed views of all the splendor. We can't forget that it was highly unusual to see the opposite sex's body, outside of married couples or professional ladies. It was considered indecent to show bare arms, to show your ankles, or to have low necklines. This is my grandparents' photo album. My grandfather was born in 1900 and my grandmother in 1908. Of course, you also have to say that with going swimming, there wasn't a lot of fun in life compared to today. There were radios, but there weren't TVs. No one had money for it. So where did you go for fun? You went into nature. In the Middle Ages, nude public baths were commonplace. However, for many decades afterwards, these places fell out of favor, regarded as dangerous and filled with disease. And so Europeans in the 19th century only dared very hesitantly to return to the water. In the 16th and 17th centuries, water was considered to be a negative element, meaning nobody learned to swim. There were only very few who could. There were these wooden-fenced bathing establishments, yes, and this was actually the first women's swimming school in Vienna, where the women learned fully clothed. They actually used to wear flannel suits, a quite bulky material which takes a long time to dry, and which stuck to the body very tightly when it was wet. It was very uncomfortable, and they would wear trousers and a striped top. You definitely had to take them off immediately after swimming, so it wouldn't work like today where you can lay in the sun to dry and then go back in the water later on. Getting undressed, putting on the bathing suit, and then repeating the same process, all in a public space, was a sensation in and of itself. The swimming students were all ladies of high society. It was said that holes were drilled into the wood boards by men, because apart from the swimming instructors, no men had access inside. So they would supposedly look in through these holes to see how the women looked in their swimsuits. Swimming lessons were recommended to noble ladies as preparation for their summer trips, even if they were reluctant at first.
It is not without reason that nature has implanted a special fear of cold baths into delicate females. But once you have overcome this small inconvenience, your body will be refreshed by the water. You'll be rewarded by youthful strength, grace, and beauty.
The first women's swimming school was located in Kaiserwasser, very close to today's Gansehaufels. This green sand island in the old Danube was once used to breed geese, but it has since been a bathing paradise for Viennese people for over 100 years. Up to 18,000 guests come here on hot summer days, making it one of the largest and most beautiful open-air pools in Europe. The wonderfully shady area is laid out like a village and has always offered a variety of leisure activities. Everything your heart could desire in summer. The area also has a cult character thanks to the cabins, which are always fully booked. Several thousand Viennese have an annual ticket for the baths. Extra special are the long-term renters.
Firstly, I have everything in there in the cabin. I don't need to carry anything back and forth. It's also useful in the winter. There's no space in the cellar at the moment. The tradition I have at the beginning of the season is to always go down the slide before the children all arrive. We're always using the baths already by the time the good weather arrives. My wife has been about 50 times this year, I think, already.
A little second home, so to speak. These windowless rental properties have a long waiting list. People decorate the spaces carefully and create a sort of holiday comfort. However, you are not allowed to stay overnight, and there are no sockets for a refrigerator or cooker.
We drive to the restaurant with a golf cart. The facilities are very good. So, here is my cabin, about 10 square meters. We have all our camping stuff, 4 fold-up chairs, a table.
You get to know one another very closely, in swimming costumes, hair messy and dripping wet. Not only the regular guests, but also the entire staff quickly become like extended family.
You always used to sit around in swimming costumes. My wife always used to wonder where I was and then spot my costume and swim towards me.
Carved out by the water of the Danube is the famous floodplain landscape called the Prater, a shady, watery green area which is a popular destination for Viennese people in summer. The Vienna Prater was the first local recreation area for the Viennese people. It was originally a private territory for the royal family of the empire. The Habsburgs used it primarily for hunting, but also for horse riding, so it was a private area. Kaiser Joseph II, the successor of Maria Theresia, was the one who made the area open to the public in 1766, which was the final push in making it a local recreational place for Viennese people. You could go for a walk, spend time in fresh air, and also get some green space. But it also became more and more of a social meeting place. And since the early 1930s, the spacious stadium pool, surrounded by large sports facilities, has been located in this expansive green space in the center of the metropolis. The grandstands with more than 2,000 seats and the 50-meter-long sports pool give it away. The pool was designed for training and competitions right from the start. The construction of the facility emphasized the new ideals for body image at the time, focused on strength and health, and not just for the rich, but for the whole population. Movement in water means surrendering yourself completely to the elements and using your own buoyancy, a feeling which has drawn many people to natural bodies of water, such as in the Freudenau and on other riverbanks where no admission fee is required. Children who lived by the water were there often naturally. You can't do that today, but it was common at the time. In the end, it was part of the normal daily routine for the children who lived here in the area. They were definitely not rich children. We just used to cycle there and jump in. With these sort of brick ponds, it was just endless fun. There was nothing to do except exist. I don't know all of the banks where you could go in down that way, but on that side of the Danube, there are wonderful places, beautiful and blue like you can't imagine, with sunflower fields all around. And the water was really light blue. We had a favorite pool, which was near Guntramsdorf, and it was secret and small. Hardly anyone knew about it, so we went there often for a few years.
I can still remember it well from when I was 14, 15 years old. We went often, of course. We were very free and the water was good there. And if you could swim, well, the pond was, of course, something far different from a swimming pool.
On the slopes of the Koppenzell in Vienna's wealthy Dobling district, those who are well-to-do in Vienna have always liked to gather, or at least those who think highly of themselves. Since the early 1920s, the shady woodland baths on Hockenstrasse has remained impressive, offering a sensational panoramic view over the whole of Vienna. Some people appreciate the view, others the see and be seen attitude. Others prefer to hide from prying eyes in hidden spots under the trees. Those searching for nature in the height of summer have never been disappointed by the green spaces in Vienna. This need for fresh air was so great, and in Vienna, as a metropolis which had exploded in size in the turn of the century, suddenly had more than 2 million inhabitants. This getting out of the city in the summer meant simply finding fresh air and access to a garden. It was so desirable. Especially in July and August, when the city was heated up and the lavish clothing stuck heavily to the skin, the longing to cool down must have been great. Before the electrification of houses, refrigerators for ice-cold refreshments were anything but a necessity, and only existed in very few households. The pre-industrial ice chest was a piece of furniture filled with ice from ice ponds. The blocks of ice were cut from lakes in winter when they were frozen, then brought into underground caverns, and then with those you could cool food and drinks for a few days. Ice production was a separate industry. Following the invention of cooling machines, ice factories emerged before the turn of the century, which could deliver ice all year round. The only salvation from the heat was often just the shade of a parasol, of course one in fitting with the summer fashion. Of course, if I had a real lace umbrella from Brussels with an ivory handle, I would either belong to the imperial family or new money nobility. So I would be able to afford everything and would show that off when going for a walk on the promenade. If you look at reports from the times around 1900, I would say that it wasn't really much colder than today. Like in the summer when Franz Ferdinand was murdered, it must have been very hot. That was in 1914. The issues with heat also had to do with the strict moral codes. For instance, showing your arms or neckline was only allowed for one occasion, balls. So that was when it was possible, and that became widespread. Ball gowns became very popular, showing what you had. But in the summer, when you were out in public or taking a walk, it wasn't actually possible to show skin because otherwise you would have been judged harshly. Shade was not only needed to cool the body, but also to maintain the noble ideals of paleness. A suntan was the last thing that people would have wanted in Imperial times. It was so strongly feared that people sometimes wouldn't go out at all during summer, or they would wear really opaque veils. This was the case for people like Kaiserin Elizabeth, who no longer wanted to show her face after her 35th birthday anyway. But it wasn't just that. She had probably noticed, and dermatologists had told her, that all the boat trips she took, where she was frequently in the sun, or these mountain walks, were extremely harmful to the skin. This idea of white skin was actually remarked upon by Coco Chanel, who said that a brown tan stood for sportiness, independence, and the free development of women. But this took a long time to develop in the 20s and 30s. And only after then did it become possible to show yourself with a tanned face. Before then, those with tanned faces were said to look like farmers, which was the world insult in the 19th century. Anyone who could afford it, or who had spots left over from illness, would try to cover them up with white paste to create the illusion of a perfect white face. But this paste often contained white lead, which would damage the skin, and in later years the skin would actually become irreparably destroyed. Traveling like Kaiserin Sissi was something only reserved for aristocrats. For many years after the end of the monarchy, pleasure trips to the Adriatic, for example, were not possible for most. And so trips to the open-air pools, which were springing up everywhere, became part of the joys of summer.
Significantly more people went swimming in the summer and also went to the nearby lakes on holiday like we do today. Long journeys to the sea or things like that were only possible for a limited group of people.
We went once because my mother really wanted us to go to Italy, to Grado, which she liked so much. My granddad got sunburned. My grandma was too warm, and she didn't want to go on the sand because she couldn't wear her heels. No, it was a one-off trip. Of course, it doesn't always have to involve sunburn, but with the trend towards sport and fun in the fresh air, the tan finally got its image correction. Of course, as seamlessly as possible, because the airy summer fashion should always be shown to its best advantage. Following fresh air cures and swimming, the latest trend in the 1950s was naked sunbathing.
A former policeman told me once that on the roof there were gender-separated sunbathing places, and there you were allowed to lay naked in the sun, and there was some report of theft, and he had to go to the women's area. We asked if they were embarrassed, but he said the only embarrassed one was him. To be freed from annoying clothes, everyone looks for their own individual pleasure in their own way.
It was just a normal thing, as a child to lie in the meadow and do nothing. A break from everyday life in the great outdoors, Most participants desperately needed this, whether it came in the form of wild swimming in open waters or in the new outdoor pools. The desire for light, sun and water on the skin was finally socially established after the turn of the century. Actually, it provided an opportunity for everyone to get out for a bit and get some fresh air. This was a huge issue in Vienna, a city that was particularly popular in the 18th and 19th centuries. At that time, the city was not paved, it was dusty, it was hot and sticky, and there was an opportunity to get out of the cramped living conditions, out of the dark, often dark apartments, and just be out in the fresh air. With horse cart or by train, all Viennese who could afford to left to go to the countryside. Baden was always a popular location for day trips because of its easy accessibility and thermal springs, which were praised for their healing properties. The elegant Lido has been attracting visitors since the mid-20s.
We have a lot of guests, even from abroad. And lots of Viennese people like to come at the weekend when the weather is very warm to escape the hustle and bustle and the heat of the big city. Basically, if you aren't there at 8 in the morning, then it's all full of Viennese people and you can't even fit in the pool.
Although the Viennese have their own kilometers of beaches, unlike any other city in Europe, with clean waters, wonderful meadows and shady trees. The layout of the Danube has changed. In the area of Vienna, it used to branch out into many small rivers, which was very picturesque. However, which meant that there were always major floods. In order to avoid these floods, the Danube area in Vienna was changed. It was actually changed into a local recreation area that is really very unique for a city of millions that isn't by the sea or a lake. In some areas, especially the old Danube, for instance, a branch of the main river was then separated, and it became like a lake which fed primarily from groundwater. And that was the opportunity for the Viennese to establish a beach there.
In a place like this, which has inspired poets and composers, it's surprising that the city of Vienna has an internationally recognized treasure, which has been missed so far by many: our open-air baths. There is not another city in the world which, firstly, has as much to offer as Vienna, and secondly, whose diversity so richly suits the respective tastes of those looking for cool waters. For the expert Viennese, a pool is not just a pool. These individualists could not bear it if their bathing destinations were visually ordinary, with a changing room, sunbathing areas, showers, and of course pool made from concrete, glass and water, and a bit of green. No, that's not how it works in Vienna.
The bathing paradise of Vienna, with its different beaches on the Danube, created a training area for soldiers. At that time, swimming for men was mostly a military sport. They also had a full bodysuit up to the knee, also made of a thick cotton material, but that was more something that was provided by the military. Military swimming involved more specified lengths for physical fitness, and the women at the time were there more to learn to swim. The 15-year-old future Kaiser Franz Josef also trained there and wrote in his diary,
"We arrived at the military swimming pool and at 6:30 a.m. and swam there so I could get used to the cold temperatures of the Danube, because I'm supposed to swim across it soon."
Which I managed to do just 4 days later. The gentlemen in the sports pool and the ladies in the swimming school. It was inevitable that sooner or later the sexes would meet each other. A longing for cool water brought everyone together in the same water, and the shore areas could not remain strictly separated long term. The desire to look was too great on both sides. For the men, it was, of course, also an opportunity to present themselves, which is why the areas had popular gymnastics apparatus where they could show off. The baths were also an opportunity for people to get to know each other in a very free environment, which wouldn't have existed otherwise in the city. And many women also found the joy of exercise, but it took time to rid the many layers of clothing. Bathing without corsets or in swimwear that we could recognize today only happened much later, so only actually from the 1920s for sporting activity. The swimsuits became very sporty. That had a lot to do with the development of social democracy in Vienna. This inspired the so-called new people, who were healthy, sporty, which was strongly promoted. There were countless bathing establishments, many of which still exist today, which were built throughout the city. Girls and boys were given a sporting education, including swimming, and this is how the swimsuit emerged as the sporty piece of clothing we recognize today, just 100 years ago. Once they were freed from their bodices, hoods and petticoats, there was no stopping women. Like newly released prisoners, women threw themselves in at the deep end, training in teams and competing. Women were excluded from sporting activities for longer than men because of the morale circumstances and the virtues of the time. But they fought hard, and there were already swimming clubs by the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, as well as other opportunities to do sports and hold sports competitions. But the women had to fight longer for this right. For example, they even needed a police officer's allowance for the first competitions. And it actually took until the 1920s for this equality to also become possible in physical training. And one thing is certain, the invention of the tight swimsuit played a significant role. Diving and rowing in crinoline was unthinkable. So women had to cover themselves completely. And they also wore thick wool and cotton fabrics, which is why women who could actually swim had to be saved from drowning again and again, because of these heavy fabrics, which would drag them under. It wasn't safe, which meant women couldn't really go for a relaxing swim. Because at the beginning of the new swimming culture in the 19th century, people dressed up for the water almost as much as they had previously laboriously undressed. Some of them had short or three-quarter-length sleeves, and I would imagine that underneath those they would also have worn at least a corset. And of course, it was also necessary to cover the head. The fashion for wearing a hat lasted basically until the 1950s. After that, with the sexual revolution and all the youth movements in the 60s, it was time for women to leave the hat behind. For example, my grandmother wore a hat until well into the 60s, and it was unthinkable to go out without one around the early 1900s for everyone. Not just for the nobles, but also for normal middle and working class women. They wore a hat to work, and on Sundays they would put on a cheap bonnet. It was just part of fashion. And the hat was an essential part of the silhouette of a man or woman. Just as we think today about how our hairstyles go with our outfit. They thought the same. Which hat matches the outfit from top to bottom? And so they went into the water with their hats. Diving was therefore not popular with women. In the 1880s, they already had full bathing suits, complete with a belt and tights, with shoes and a matching hat. It was an ensemble, just like normal clothes, which was coordinated. Only in the 1920s did the fabric on women's bodies become dramatically reduced, in everyday wear as well as in swimming costumes. Sleeves became straps, and the hem moved above the knee. US films have already shown actresses in two-piece bikinis, as they were known as later. And this was, of course, adapted relatively quickly into everyday life. In the ultra-modern Baden outdoor swimming pool with sandy beaches and palm trees, which was Europe's largest pool when it opened in 1926, enthusiastic visitors were fashionably ahead from the start.
The women already wore short swimsuits. This was not commonplace. For example, my grandmother had still worn a long one, and the men bathed topless. That's why, for example, the Orthodox Jews or strict Catholics went to the swimming pool, which wasn't yet quite so progressive.
Some enjoy taking prime position on a fashionable beach. For others, the idol of natural waters is more attractive. Evelina Strebinger only went to the open-air pool twice in her life. She grew up swimming in the natural ponds. My grandfather was part of the Nature Friends group, and we went hiking a lot, and of course swimming in summer. Our favorite place was the Lobau or Heustattelwasser, but sometimes we went in the Danube too. My grandma is sitting there, and it's quite interesting to see her pearl necklace with her bathing suit and her glasses, and the portable radio on the table with real porcelain plates, cups, and a tablecloth. And my brother is in the front in the playpen, and she looks very happy. The grandparents discovered these bathing places in their youth. Young people have always valued freedom, wilderness, and hidden places in the tall grass.
Down in the Lobau. If I only knew the place. Down in the Lobau, I kissed a girl. Her eyes were as blue as the violets in the meadow, in the marvelous spot in the Lobau.
The expectations for comfort were low, the thirst for adventure high, and the summers on the shore with friends and later family brought great joy to many lives. You can see that what made these places so beautiful was the life on the Danube, that something was always passing by, that you could see ships. It was an entertaining place. And in the Lobau, it was lovely. The water was warm because you couldn't really swim properly in the Danube. There is another photo where you can see my grandparents. I think it was at the banks of the Danube with the small tents. And they had the tents with them often because they went on day trips a lot when they would travel on Friday by bike, for example. And then brought the tent with them because they couldn't afford to stay somewhere overnight. The largest flood area, which wasn't managed at the time, could be reached by car. You had to take everything with you, so all the fishing gear and the chairs and the table and the food and everything was loaded in. So it was quite tight.
Wir bringen Ihnen jetzt, ob Sie es hören wollen oder nicht, unseren Campingrundreisebericht. Das Wichtigste beim Camping ist ein erstklassiges Zelt. Man braucht einen Tisch, einen Sonnenschirm und auch ein Bett, das sehr gut hält. Dann braucht man Luftmatratzen, Schlafsack, einen Sessel für den Gast und als Österreicher einen rot-weiß-roten Fahnenmast.
On the photo here it says, Evelina is learning to wash the car, 57. There were people with them on the trip, and cars always got washed there. And so you drove somewhere you could get some water, or carried it down and then washed it. Wild swimming is a way of life, and there are many spots surrounding the water-rich Vienna. Besides, how else would we have the money for going to the pool and for ice cream? My grandmother always managed to conjure things up. How she did it, I don't know, but they were really resourceful. Swimming in nature is, like many things, not everyone's cup of tea. Okay, so there's no toilet. That's just how it is. You have to find another spot and work it out. It's always worked in the past, so I remember these times at the Danube very fondly. It was so peaceful, just me and my thoughts. Already around 1900, there were the first efforts to go back to nature and experience freedom with the whole body. The senses needed bare skin, not umbrellas and charm. Because of that, the FKK trend of nudist swimming took off quickly in the Danube, with the culture developing in the 20th century. And this revolutionary, Florian Berndl, turned Viennese customs upside down. He was a miracle healer, a natural doctor, and unique figure in Vienna, who actually turned this island into an area promoting bodily freedom and not swimming completely covered up. This was, of course, a scandal at the time, and the city of Vienna banned it and cancelled his lease. The sworn naturists weren't prevented from running a profitable spa successfully in the immediate vicinity of the area.
Come back to nature. The already tried and tested air, sun and sand of the baths have been proven successful for all ailments and infirmities, accessible for every man and child, separated by gender. Find nature-friendly advice here.
Whether with a bathing suit or without, longing for cool water in summer to get out of the city and your clothes was a hit for everyone. A large part of the population was not wealthy. Especially in Vienna, there was a large proportion in the 19th century of servants, workers, day labourers, who, of course, did not have an opportunity to take a summer holiday. North of Vienna, a river bath was established in 1903 on a disused part of the Danube near Kritzendorf. At first, there were simple bathing areas offering a safe place to swim for non-swimmers and swimming students. After the First World War, the Strandbad gradually developed into a huge holiday destination with extensive investments, where up to 12,000 visitors from all walks of life mixed. Unlike in the comparable Viennese vicinities, the people in Kritzendorf did not remain among their own kind. At the end of the 20s, members of the upper class settled here and built weekend houses. It was mostly well-known Viennese architects, among them Adolf Loos. The Viennese Symphony Orchestra played in the beach pavilion. This Riviera on the Danube was known beyond the region and mentioned in songs and literature. For example, in Friedrich Thorberg's Tante Jonisch and in Jaimito von Doderich's Strodl-Hoferstiege. The decisive factor was the good accessibility from Vienna. The Franz Josef train was a very significant development, creating the possibility of summer holidays and exploring the countryside. With the railway line leading from Vienna past the well-known riverbanks, such as Griefenstein, Kritzendorf, via Tallinn, and then up to Kamptal, which was actually also discovered at the time as a summer resort and recreational area. The Kaiser Franz Josef Railway actually played a very decisive role, because it actually connected these places together and offered the opportunity for the first time to get out of the city. The forest area, well known for its cool temperatures, is a comfort to city dwellers on oppressively hot summer days. Lots of forest and nature, a simple country life, fewer people, and an ice-cold river. These are the ingredients for a much appreciated summer refresh. Gars am Kamp, in the forest district with its magical river bath, was a destination that was quickly accessible from Vienna. The idea of summer breaks arose in the 19th century. It was a precursor to today's holidays, where stays at the destinations often lasted several weeks or even months. People often took half their house along with them to rented accommodation, staying there for the whole summer. Aristocrats and wealthy people travelled with staff. Working men with high positions occasionally commuted back to Vienna to pursue their business obligations and left the family to relax at the holiday resort. Viennese society met at the most popular places. People paid respects, bonding over games and sports, gossips, and of course, under the mild sun, there was plenty of flirting and matchmaking. Musicians and poets followed the holidaymakers, providing entertainment. It was the birth of tourism in Austria. These summer breaks brought a popularity to the places and a seasonal economy. Humans are herd animals, and so from the beginning, the conviviality of the outdoor pools played a big role. On the lawns and on the banks of lakes and rivers, the lightness of the summer and leisure time provided a breeding ground for relaxed chats and new acquaintances. The goings-on in the outdoor pool have sometimes even taken on a festival character, if you like, transforming Vienna into one great party mile. There was something for everyone there, from parties to hospitality. So it was really a big area where you could spend your free time.
You can't imagine how fun and lively it was. There was every kind of event, like a beauty contest, Miss Beach, which was voted for each year to the amusement of the audience, seeing the different scanty bathing clothes.
Summer heat and the desire to undress, glimpses of naked skin, and the effects of wet clothes on the body. That's what makes the open-air pools so attractive. Given the skimpy swimming costumes, you only needed little imagination to undress attractive people in your mind. You could see the ladies in their swimsuits, although at the beginning you didn't see much because women had to cover their bodies completely. The clothes couldn't be tight or see-through when wet. But it was still an opportunity to see each other a little in a relaxed, fun environment, and also to get to know each other and to flirt, which is why the open-air pools were also very popular.
Come on the ladder, Louise. Show your nice jersey. Climb out of the water. Enjoy the land. Come and say hello. From the steep bank to the water, I enjoy to see you swim, but only so that you will eventually climb the bank again. Come and allow me a kiss, even on the hand. Venus, beloved Venus, please climb back upon to land.